How's it going, guys? Peshkats here, and welcome to my Project Krone deck analysis. Project Krone is a deck archetype from Idolmaster Cinderella Girls and can currently only be built in Japanese, since the second set of IMCG is not available in English at the time of this recording. This deck plays very similarly to a standard red-blue Uzuki Minami type build, but features a very distinct level 3 game that can be extremely punishing if you are unprepared to play against it. In the anime, there are 10 members of Project Krone, but in Weiss Schwarz, 3 of the members, Rin, Karen, and Now, were put into their own deck, the infamous Triad Primus deck. The other 7 members, Fumika, Frederica, Shuko, Kanade, Arisu, Yui, and Anastasia, were put into the Project Krone archetype. Together with Krone's director Mishiro, Krone has 8 character cards in total to make use of. First, let's talk about each of the Krone cards and whether or not I feel they are worth using in the deck. Let's start with the level 3 character that gives Krone its identity as a deck. Project Krone Fumika is a very powerful level 3, especially against unprepared or unaware opponents. Apart from being a healer, she has a Climax combo which can return cards from your opponent's waiting room back into their deck. When the book Climax Project Krone is played, if she is in the front row, you may shuffle back 1 card per character on your stage with Krone in its name. With a full board of Krone, 1 Fumika allows you to shuffle back 5 cards, while triple Fumika allows you to shuffle back a maximum of 15. This can be disastrous to downright lethal depending on your opponent's deck state, potentially taking them from a 0-in-1 climax ratio to a 0-in-16 climax ratio, which is more or less just game ending if your opponent doesn't have some way of mass milling or free-freshing during your turn. The next card on the list is Frederica, who runs double duty as Krone's main back row support and brainstormer. She gives 500 power to characters in front, and gains a salvage brainstorm ability if you have the book Climax Project Krone in your waiting room. Requiring a specific climax in the waiting room is a pretty strange restriction, and can sometimes be a detriment to the deck running smoothly, but when you are able to fulfill the requirement, Frederica shows up as a powerful back row character whose 2 abilities combined make her an even stronger card than Kanako Mimura, which is the main brainstorm typically used in regular IMCG builds. Now let's talk about the other level 0 back row character in Krone, Mishiro. While not a Krone member herself, she does have the Krone tag in her name, which makes her an eligible card for triggering Fumika's Climax combo. Her primary ability is being able to recruit idols for Project Krone. With a cost of pay 1, clock yourself 1, and rest this, you can search your deck for any Krone character and add it to your hand. This can be very useful for grabbing a Frederica if you don't open with one, that 3rd Fumika for your level 3 combo, or an Arisu if you need hand filter. Her other ability lets you give 1000 power to one of your characters at the start of your opponent's draw phase, which can sometimes come in handy against decks that have low power 0 or level 1 characters. You should also use this ability on your Frederica if you are playing the matchup against Osomatsu-san or Monogatari, so that she doesn't get sniped by Kaiki abilities. Arisu, or rather Tachibana-san, is a powerful utility level 0 with a double hand filter effect. She has a fairly standard top check filter effect. When she's played, reveal the top card of your deck, and if it's a music character, add it to your hand and discard a card. But she also has a secondary hand fix. When she's played, you may discard a music character to draw a card. These 2 abilities can be used in whichever order you want, and each has their own advantage in certain situations. A nice side advantage of this card is that it can perform very well with Frederica and Kome. She lets you dig 1 card deeper into your deck to potentially hit a climax for Freddy's brainstorm ability, or dig 1 card deeper to grab that all-important climax using Kome's effect. She can also pick up a climax herself by using her discard draw ability, which sometimes comes in very handy. Yui is a peculiar card. She's a 2-1 soul support that gives 500 power and 1 soul to all Krone characters in front of her. Additionally, you can pay 1 and rest her to give one of your music characters, and it doesn't have to be Krone, plus 1 soul for the turn. This can be extremely useful for buffing your random costless Krone characters into 2 soul attackers, but can also be useful for creating situations for perfect side attacks in the endgame. Sometimes you can even just slap her in the back row to turn 9 guaranteed Fumika damage into 12. The other 3 Krone cards are ones that I personally do not run in my deck, but I'll talk about them anyway. Shuko is a level 1 that has hand encore and a very low base power at only 2000. However, at the start of either player's attack phase, she can give herself a 4500 boost if you have the Project Krone Climax in your waiting room. I actually used to run this card, but while I feel a costless 6500 hand encore is very nice, I didn't feel I ended up needing it in my most recent builds. Kanade is a very basic beatstick type character. If you have 3 or more other music characters, she gets 2000 power on attack, bringing her up to 7k. Between this card and My First Star Minami, Minami has a higher power ceiling by 500 points, but Kanade is able to keep getting the buff if she stays on the field. However, with only 5000 base power, this doesn't seem too likely, and Minami also serves the alternative purpose of being brought out at level 3 by Anastasia. Speaking of Anastasia, she's our last Krone card. She's a level 0 with 2000 power, but she gains 1500 if you have 2 or less stock. She also has a 1000 field counter ability. While this card is nifty, I don't feel like it has a place in the deck over other options which are more valuable for their utility. Now let's build a deck. We're going to start with our Climax Combos. Of course, we have Fumika and the Project Krone book for level 3, and I choose to run Minami Nita at level 1. She's easily the most potent level 1 combo in Cinderella Girls, capable of getting you card advantage at no cost, while simultaneously buffing other characters on your stage and milling through your deck quickly. Her Pants Climax also allows us to salvage more Pants for more Minami combos, or you can salvage Book for your level 3 game. The next thing I like to look at in my deck building process are the level 0s and 1s. In my opinion, 4 copies of Frederica are staple in Krone builds, so I'm going to be throwing those in first. For front row cards, I choose to play 4 Rika runners and 2 Mio stock suiciders. Both cards are great level 0 options, and they also help to color fix for yellow down the line. The rest of my 0 line is utility. 3 copies of Kome are absolutely insane in this deck, helping you mill through the deck for free and find climaxes for your combos. I previously ran 2, but made room for a third by taking out a Sae counter. 3 Arisus and 2 Mikus are very helpful cards for hand fixing and filtering. And finally, I run 2 Mishiros to round out the 0 line with a little bit of plussing and potentially boosting myself to level 1 or level 3 if I want to use my Minami or Fumika combos. This ends up coming out to 20 level 0s, which to some of you might seem like a pretty massive number, but personally I like running a high amount of low-level utility cards to not only ensure that my early game goes smoothly, but also to ensure that I can constantly control the contents of my hand and deck during the later stages of the game. At level 1, I run a very simple lineup: 4 Minami Nita, 3 My First Star Minami, 2 My First Star Konako, and 1 Sae counter. Minami Nita and her Climax combo are the main attraction of the level 1 game for reasons I mentioned earlier. My First Star Minami is a simple but potent costless beater, which is also used in our level 3 game. Konako is very helpful in matchups against field-based decks capable of having high power characters at level 1, such as Kantai Collection builds running Prince Eugen and Bismarck, or Milky Holmes and their gigantic 3k counters. Since the overall power level of this level 1 game is defensively much lower, I opted to only run 1 copy of Sae. This gives us a total of 10 level 1 characters. Next, let's look at level 2s and 3s. There's no reason not to run Triad Primus Rin in this deck. She's a very solid early play healer in the deck's primary color, blue, in a deck that has an immense amount of control over its deck state through abilities like Minami, Kome, and Frederica. She's able to lock down the center column, easily achieving 11 to 12k power, and also negating your opponent's ability to use counters against her attacks, most notably anti-change counters. However, since the card isn't a centerpiece of the deck's strategy like it is in Triad Primus, I choose to run 2 copies. Now for actual level 2s. 1 copy of Mayu is pretty much staple in every IMCG deck, and there's no reason not to run her, so let's throw her into the deck. I run 1 copy of Yui. While she is a useful card, she's not always necessary to grab and use, but it's nice to have the option to grab her when I need a little extra push. Finally, I run 1 anti-level 3 character, apart from Mayu. I've been testing between Nina and Konako. Both of them have had their own usefulness, with Nina guaranteeing my opponent's early plays leave the field for good, but Konako sticks around herself to potentially kill multiple level 3s on different turns thanks to her red encore ability. Ultimately, I'm going to leave this up to preference, but I feel like a lot of people will argue towards running Nina. This gives me a total of 3 level 2 characters. At level 3, outside from the aforementioned 4 Fumikas and 2 TP Rins, I run 2 copies of Anastasia and 1 new challenge Minami. Anastasia gives me a way out if I'm against an opponent who has recently refreshed their deck or is well compressed enough that even Fumika can't break through everything, and I need a little bit of an extra push. The 1 copy of Minami is a tech against decks with free fresh counters such as Excel World or Gochiusa, since free fresh counters are one of the biggest counters to this deck's strategy. Her top check 3 ability is also useful for digging for climaxes or more Fumikas, etc., and her +1 soul ability when a character is called from waiting room synergizes with Anastasia level 3. This comes out to 9 level 3 characters, bringing us to a total of 50 cards in the deck when you count the climaxes, which are 4 pants and 4 books. Let's talk briefly about matchups. This deck's performance is heavily based on your opponent. If you are against an opponent who is unaware of how the deck functions at level 3 or how to play around it, they might be in for a bad time.
Wait, no, not like this, not like this, Mr. Chan, no, Mr. Chan, not like this, shuffle it back to your deck. No, not like this, Mr. Chan, not like this!
Apart from that, this deck does better against decks who do not have ways to massively mill through their deck with abilities, such as Azusa or Rize effects or spammable brainstorms. On the flip side, this deck has much worse matchups against decks that do have these mechanics, as a smart player will know to mill their deck to a refresh before hitting this deck to level 3. Literally, the worst thing you can do when playing against Krone is to leave your deck at exactly 1 card, especially if that card is not a climax. Proceed with caution when playing against Krone, because you might just find yourself on the receiving end of 12 clean damage, courtesy of Fumika. This concludes my deck analysis on Project Krone. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and until next time, this has been Peshcats. Bye!